If you've been following games industry goings-on, then you'll know that Activision Blizzard has been in the spotlight for a couple months now, and not for good reasons. The publisher is currently in something of a rut when it comes to financial performance and future prospects, and the end result is that the company's stock are currently at some of the lowest it's been since early 2017, having dropped by around 48% since its peak. To be fair, a general dip in stock is something that the gaming industry as a whole seems to be experiencing, but at the same time, there is no question that Activision's stock decline has been bolstered by numerous unfortunate occurrences starting late last year. And now a recent report suggests that the company is making preparations for a mass layoff that could culminate in hundreds of people losing their jobs. The following information was first reported by website Bloomberg on February 7th, 2018, with a headline that reads, quote, Activision's plan to cut hundreds of jobs caps tumultuous week. The most relevant portions of the article read as follows. Activision Blizzard plans to announce job cuts Tuesday in the face of slowing sales, according to people familiar with the matter, bringing fresh upheaval after spotty results roiled stocks this week. The shares dropped as much as 2.5% to $42.88 on Friday. The layoffs, which could number in the hundreds, are part of a restructuring aimed at centralizing functions and boosting profit, said one of the people, who asked not to be identified because the changes haven't been announced. Activision employed 9,800 people at the end of 2017. Now, until Activision confirms this to be true, until Tuesday arrives, this should probably be treated as a rumor rather than fact, but at the same time, one can hardly say that the writing wasn't on the wall with this one. Troubles for the company began back in early November of last year when they thoroughly botched the announcement of Diablo Immortal, which was unveiled at BlizzCon 2018 to major backlash and disappointment. This resulted in Activision Blizzard stock suffering a significant drop, and in the same week, they reported during a financial briefing that overall active users across all their published games were declining, and that Destiny 2's Forsaken DLC failed to perform to expectations. That's when the company's stock really plummeted, falling by about 10%, which was compounded by the fact that the entire market was in freefall at the time. It was also around then that we began to see early signs that Bungie and Activision were headed towards diverging paths. While Activision expressed disappointment in the way Destiny 2 Forsaken performed, Destiny game director Luke Smith took to Twitter to share the complete opposite sentiment, stating that the studio is not disappointed with Forsaken, before assuring that building Destiny for players who love it will remain their primary goal moving forward. From there, we began to hear reports of how, in light of recent financial woes, Activision was looking for measures to cut costs across all their studios and subsidiaries. In a report published by Kotaku editor Jason Schreier on November 21st, 2018, it was detailed how Activision had planted a new CFO within the traditionally separate and independent Blizzard to enforce cost-cutting initiatives, with the goal being to save as much money as possible while bolstering the output of games, with sources within Blizzard expressing discontent over Activision's seeping influence and the resulting change in internal culture. One way this cost-cutting initiative manifested was through the abrupt announcement that Heroes of the Storm development would be scaled down and that all esports events would be cancelled, to the dismay of casters and players who had been preparing for months before the rug was pulled from under them. Days later, we started hearing reports of how Blizzard was going out of their way to offer buyouts and generous severance packages to employees working within non-game development departments through a program called Career Crossroads. The program is actually nothing new, but whereas it was originally designed to help customer service representatives who had been working with the company for more than 5 years transition, it was suddenly changed to encompass the quality assurance and IT departments as well, with the number of employment years required having been reduced. A bunch of people have since voluntarily taken advantage of these buyouts, with Blizzard's main European customer support office in Ireland seeing as many as over 100 people who might have sensed a foreboding future take the severance and up and leave, according to a Eurogamer article published on December 21st, 2018. Aside from the fact that this meant the department was woefully understaffed, employees were concerned that this all signaled ill omen. As one source told Eurogamer, at this point it's causing stress and a lot of questions about people who settled here with families. Kotaku sources also expressed similar sentiments, with one relevant quote from their December 21st article stating the following, And among Blizzard staff and close observers, rumors have circulated about potential layoffs in the new year. The game development teams are seen as safe. The mandate is to make more games after all, but those at other departments are worried about what might be coming when 2019 arrives. The article also highlighted a number of quotes from current and former Blizzard employees who have relayed how a lot of decisions within the studio are now being driven by business, marketing, and finance folks, which is unprecedented. One source told Kotaku this: "Blizzard is a special place. A lot of people are worried about the future of Blizzard. If the Activision method seeps in more, what that's going to become." Which finally brings us into the new year, when we saw major overturns in the company's corporate structure from the outset. On January 2nd, 2019, it was officially announced that Spencer Neumann, former CFO of Activision Blizzard, was terminated from his employment for what they claimed to be a violation of his legal obligations to the company, by which they meant that Neumann was in discussions with Netflix to seek new employment while his contract with Activision was still active. Since then, Neumann became CFO of Netflix and Dennis Durkin has taken over. The following day, on January 3rd, it was officially confirmed that another executive would be leaving the company, Amrita Ahuja, whose name you may recognize as the CFO of Blizzard, who was appointed by Activision as of March 2018 to enforce the company's cost-cutting initiative. So right at the beginning of the year, Activision lost two of their most experienced executives, both of who seemed in a rush to leave the company. Neumann was apparently willing to go as far as interviewing with Netflix and violate his contract with Activision, while Amrita Ahuja wasn't even in her new post for a year before she just up and left, giving off the impression that executives were abandoning a sinking ship or something. From there, the day after, on January 4th, 2019, a report from Bloomberg made it known that Activision's newly appointed CFO would be getting $15 million worth of incentive. $3.75 million of that was a direct sign-on bonus, while $11.3 million of that came in the form of restricted stock tied to the company's performance, all on top of a lucrative $900,000 annual salary and a $1.35 million target bonus. This is all particularly relevant in light of reports that Activision may soon be planning to leave hundreds of people jobless. Just think about this for a second. How fucked up is it that executives stand to make millions of dollars a year, while hundreds of hardworking employees earning far more meagerly in comparison are given the boot or being told to cut costs? Dennis Durkin's sign-on bonus and salary isn't even the worst of it. We learned from a Kotaku article published on May 2018 that Activision CEO Robert Kotick made roughly $28.6 million the year prior, calculated to be 306 times the median salary of an Activision employee. And God knows he made tens of millions of dollars throughout 2018 as well. This is just scratching the surface too. There are no doubt a number of other executives within the company that also earn salaries in the millions of dollars annually. All it would take to save hundreds of jobs is for folks at the top of the pyramid to take an inconsequential pay cut so that the money can be used to pay these employees. But God forbid these greedy bastards earn a few $1 million less. God forbid they follow the example of the late Satoru Iwata and other Nintendo executives who took sizable pay cuts during Nintendo 3DS's rough launch period and the rough tenure of Wii U to avoid mass layoffs like the one Activision is currently planning after having handed their new CFO at least $15 million worth of awards on a silver platter. It's also worth noting that according to Bloomberg's article reporting impending layoffs, Activision's sales is expected to reach $7.28 billion this year, which is a 2% decline compared to last time, but it's still $7.28 billion. While the company's recent performance may not be living up to investors' expectations, I'd be hard-pressed to say that the company is in any kind of dire straits, that they're scraping by, or that they cannot afford to avoid mass layoffs if they actually tried or really gave a fuck. If Activision can afford to hand out $15 million worth of awards as a welcoming gift to an executive, if the company is generating billions of dollars in sales annually, much of it coming from microtransactions and going into the pockets at the top, then there is hardly any reason to doubt that the impending mass layoffs or cost-cutting measures are an absolute necessity, or to say that they cannot be avoided. But as I've said time and again, for these companies, it's not about maintaining a business, it's about finding ways to cut corners in order to ensure their company sees indefinite financial growth to appease investors whose only consideration is seeing their investment grow indefinitely with the company. For Activision, it's not about making back the money and resources they invested in game projects, it's about trying to mitigate that 48% drop in stock price that Activision suffered starting late last September, a culmination of consumer backlash, underwhelming performance by publisher and shareholder standards, and whatnot. As long as their bottom line of indefinite growth can be achieved, and as long as executives can continue to cash in their millions every year unimpeded along the way, they'll be happy to let everyone else around them suffer the consequences. So yeah, next time you try to justify egregious microtransactions in games by claiming that the money goes towards helping developers make games or whatever, just remember that despite the inconceivable amount of money Activision made throughout the last 12 months, despite the company having enough capital to give executives millions in annual salaries, it's ground floor employees who are getting the boot while executives continue to fill their heavy pockets. Now, it's hard to say at this point exactly which divisions within Activision will be affected most by the reported impending mass layoffs. Though according to Kotaku's report, Activision is aiming to cut costs everywhere else except their game development teams so that they can trim expenses while increasing the quantity of games produced by their various studios, Blizzard in particular. So perhaps it stands to reason that members of development teams are for the most part safe from getting laid off. Perhaps layoffs will be more focused on people in the customer service, quality assurance, and IT departments, which is still far from ideal. It's hard to say for sure though. I suppose we'll have to wait until Tuesday to find out about the scale of the layoffs and which departments will be most affected. Now, Jason Schreier, who's been investigating behind-the-scene goings-on at Activision Blizzard for quite some time, did provide the following insight in response to Bloomberg's latest article. This has been expected for months now, and rumors started heating up earlier this week. Employees at both Activision and Blizzard have told me they have been coming into work every day with no clue what might happen. Horrible, horrible news. So yeah, not even people within Activision and Blizzard have a clue as to what the future holds for them, and regardless of who the layoffs are targeting, it's just awful to know that hundreds of people may soon end up jobless. And the hope is that they will manage to land on their feet and end up working in companies who will better appreciate their talents. Before ending the video, one last major occurrence I'd like to highlight is how days after Dennis Durkin was appointed as CFO and gifted $15 million worth of awards, on January 10th, 2019, it was announced that Bungie would gain ownership of the Destiny IP and be splitting from Activision, which consumers and developers celebrated, but investors didn't take too kindly, judging by the 10% drop in stock price that followed. Activision seemingly deemed Bungie and the Destiny franchise a lost case and preferred to cut ties, seeing as how the venture wasn't as profitable as they had hoped. Perhaps another one of their cost-cutting measures. Activision might still be making a lot of money, but confidence and perception around them seems to be at an all-time low after the downward spiral began with the Diablo Immortal announcement and culminated in reported mass layoffs. Though they're not fatally wounded financially by any stretch of the imagination, I mean, they're expected to make like $7 billion, the company is in a precarious position, much of which can be attributed to decisions made by executives and unsustainable demands from investors. And it sucks to know that rather than executives taking responsibility, the ones who will ultimately suffer the brunt are hundreds of ground floor workers, whose unemployment will affect them far more dramatically than if the already filthy rich executives were to take a pay cut to try and save jobs. These are one man's perspective on the situation anyway. I'd love to hear what your take is on Bloomberg's latest report of mass layoffs in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.